This podcast contains explicit language.
Bafangu!
Houston, flight is go.
Myla, let's go. SPM, safety contact.
From Assignment X, thesoniashow.com, and Amalgamated Storytelling, this is the Dorking Out Show, the podcast for people who love stories from movies, TV, books, podcasts, and everywhere else.
Welcome to episode 116 of Dorking Out. This is the True Crime Movies edition. My name is Sonia Mansfield. My usual co-host, Christopher Allen Smith, is on sabbatical this summer. Sabbatical is my code word for rehab. So filling in for him this week is one of my favorite people who hosts every podcast, including Book vs. Movie, The Best Neighbors podcast, Fit Bottom Girls, and Not Fade Away, Margo D.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. I don't know how you found time to do our podcast, but thank you.
Well, you know what? You sent me the topic, and I'm like, I will make time. 2 a.m, I will do it. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, with the recent arrest of the Golden State Killer and then the new Netflix documentary Evil Genius, like true crime stories have been kind of on my mind. And when I thought, hey, I really want to talk about true crime, I immediately thought of you, Margo, because I know that you are a true crimer.
I am a total true crimer. I was a true crimer before I knew there was a term. You know, before there were murderinos and all that stuff. I was raised on this. My mom is a true crimer. She watched all those movies, and she instilled that love into me. And I'm so glad we're talking about this. I had so much fun, but I'll tell you, it was stressful picking my favorite 5 for the topics I'm going to cover. I don't know about you.
Yeah. My list was really long, actually. And I was like, okay, which ones are really your favorite, though? Think about it. Like, which ones do you really want to talk about? What are your favorites? And then I started re-watching a bunch of them. And my husband's actually traveling last week. And so every time I ordered a movie on Amazon, it, like, bills him. You know, he gets the email that's like... did you enjoy Bonnie and Clyde? And he's like, what are you doing over there? And I'm like, I'm just watching true crime stuff, which is what I watch all the time on Netflix when he travels anyway. Like, you know, he travels and he's like, what did you do tonight? And I was like, I watched a documentary about this guy who murdered someone, or I watched a documentary about like AIDS or something like that. And he's like, you are so fun.
You know, there's this theory that, because guys don't really do this, and there's this theory that it makes us feel a little bit safer to kind of know how bad it is. You know what I mean? Like, it can make you feel a little bit more in control. Because you're like, all right, because the lessons are you fight like crazy, right?
Right.
If you're always run away, never get in the car, always run away, yell fire, don't yell help. Right. Get more people to show up. I mean, I've got all these things. I got all these things in my head. I got this whole thing like, I'm going to act crazy. If I've got nothing else, I'm going to act batshit crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll be my one weapon, you know?
A friend of mine told me that when she gets approached by people and she gets scared, she starts barking like a dog.
Yes, that's what I was taught to do.
And
I'm ready to do it.
And it's so funny you mentioned like the idea of how it makes us feel better and what we learn from it. Because I was trying to think, like, why do I like true crime? And I was like, I think it's because I'm trying to understand something that I'm scared of. And but my husband just thinks I'm a morbid weirdo, which might be also true.
My co-host Margo P from Book vs. Movie, she's in San Diego. And she knows there's a lot of true crime in San Diego, and she's got some personal connections. She hates the topic. So I've never been able to talk about stuff like Scott Peterson or something like that with her because she just won't talk about it. It's to her, it's weird. It's not pleasant. Like she does not understand, which I respect her boundaries. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, she likes ghost stories. She likes that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's what my husband likes too. He's a ghost story guy. He's not a true crime guy.
No.
So we each made a list of 5 movies, and then we decided to up our game because that seemed criminally negligent, I guess. So you did a list of 5 true crime TV movies, on top of that list, and then I did a list of 5 true crime documentaries. So sounds right?
Excited. I'm so excited. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's do. I'm jazzed. So since you're the guest, I'll let you pick a movie first.
So let's start with the true crime films. Let's
Yeah.
just start there with theatrical.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go my first one? Or you want to go 5 down to 1?
Oh, did you put yours in a ranking?
It's no particular order. I just have them numbered out.
Yeah.
So
you could do it any way you want.
Okay. So my number 5, it's Capote. And it's directed by Bennett Miller, who also directed Foxcatcher, which is another great true crime movie, but the documentary is much better. It stars Philip Seymour Hoffman as Truman Capote. It has Catherine Keener. It has Chris Cooper. Anything with Chris Cooper is amazing. I've decided. He ups the game.
Yes.
So it's Doug Hickok and Perry Smith are the 2 killers. They killed this family. By the way, their story, the Clutter family murder, was the subject of a Sundance documentary that was fascinating. That just came out this past year. There was 3 parts.
Oh,
and they actually talked to the Clutter family.
I'm putting that on the list. In Cold Blood could have
it.
been on my list, easily.
Easily, but I got to say, I think the book is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And Truman Capote was an excellent writer, but I think the movie comes up a little flat. And it also, I think, it glamorizes the killers even more than the book does. And I have an issue with that. I've got a big, big problem with that. So and there was 2 Capote movies that came out at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it was Toby Jones.
Yeah.
Played him from Mad Men. And that was with Sandra Bullock. And I think Sandra Bullock was nominated for an Oscar for playing To Kill a Mockingbird.
Harper Lee.
The author. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's, by the way, Harper Lee and Truman Capote did grow up. Alabama, were best friends when they were kids. And then she was his research assistant for this book, but she actually, for the In Cold Blood, but she actually was more of the one that would get him into the parties and into meeting people. She was key to the success of that book. And I feel like this movie, Capote, really gets that across. I think, Philip Seymour Hoffman, R.I.P.
I know.
He's a big, burly guy. I've seen him on Broadway, and he's I mean, he was only maybe 5'8", but he just had a big presence about him. And to play the small man and do it so effectively, it's just incredible. And it's just, so that's my number 5, Capote, 2005, directed by Bennett Miller.
That is an awesome pick. I'm going to go with a very obvious choice, because I don't know if Smith and I are capable of making a list where this movie isn't on it. And it's 2007's Zodiac, directed.
Okay, that's my number 1.
Oh no! Okay, maybe we should table it then. Should I table it? And we'll.
Yeah, let's table it. And when I do my number 1, we'll both do that.
Okay. How about The Untouchables? Is that on your list?
It was, but it didn't make it, so you could talk about it.
Yay! Okay, so
Yay!
1987's The Untouchables, directed by Brian De Palma and starring Kevin Costner as Elliot Ness as a federal agent who brought down notorious gangster Al Capone, and that's played by Robert De Niro. I super love this movie. I saw it in the theater and then decided to rewatch it for this podcast, and I was so glad I did. I know that the movie's kind of corny, but Elliot Ness is corny. He's such a square that I think it works. And I know it's weird to describe a true crime movie as fun, but I actually had a lot of fun rewatching this movie. It's also got Andy Garcia, a young Andy Garcia. He's very good looking. Very good looking. Charles Martin Smith and Sean Connery, who I think he won the Oscar for this, which was really one of those, congratulations on your career Oscars. But, I mean, he's good in the movie.
It's a Lifetime Achievement Award.
For sure.
Fine. It's just the accents all over the place.
Yeah. I just love I like true crime movies, but I also like movies that are let's assemble our team and do this kind of movies. And The Untouchables is like that. So I found this very entertaining to rewatch. And
it's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, it's just It's one of those every time I see it's on, I was like, oh, the Untouchables is on, and I'll leave it on. But I hadn't sat down and watched it from beginning to end for a really long time. And I was like, what a fun rewatch. So that was I guess it would have been my number 5.
I think that's an excellent choice. And that's one of those, like, I think my parents owned it for a while on VHS. Like, we were all big fans of that movie. And that it's Brian De Palma at his best. And it's Robert De Niro playing Al Capone, and one of the most violent scenes. I saw it in the movie theater too, and people were screaming when Al takes out the bat and hits the guy at the table. Then there's that scene with the baby carriage going down the stairs. Just so much anxiety. I love
that sequence so much that I rewound it and watched it again when I was watching the movie the other night. Because it's just so well done, the way it builds up all that anxiety. And it's like watching a choreographed, like, dance number. It really is. It's so, so cool. And I know that... podcast. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. There's a podcast called I Was There Too. And it's Mac Worley, and he talks to people who had little parts in big movies. And he talked to the woman who was holding the baby carriage for that scene. And she was there for a week because, these movies take forever to do. And she was so delightful. And she's like kind of a hippie. And she says, I'm a floor sitter. So on the set, every time I would just sit down, I would just sit on the floor, and someone would yell, get her a chair. And like immediately a chair would show up. She was so freaked out like this. So yeah, such a great choice.
You have the best recommendations. I love that podcast exists, and I'm going to listen to that. This was also awesome. Like peak Kevin Costner. Like,
I like Kevin Costner.
I like Kevin Costner too. We had a whole discussion about this on Twitter last week, I think, with Adam Risky from F This Movie.
Yes.
Because somebody was making fun of me at work for liking Kevin Costner, and he's like, you need a new job. And I was like, maybe. Like, Kevin Costner is awesome. And he's so great in this movie.
He doesn't have a big amount of range, but I feel like what he does it probably better than most people.
Right.
The everyman, the square. I think he's so square. I know my friend, actually, I knew someone, this sounds so snobby, but this woman who cleaned her house like once a week when I was a kid. And her husband was in a Civil War troop. And his troupe was in Dances with Wolves. And he got to hang out with Kevin Costner, who, was directing that film, and said that he was the nicest guy, like very down to earth, very normal. And so I've always liked Kevin Costner.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yay.
I'm sorry, I name drop a lot, so
No, you don't.
I can't help it.
So what's your next pick?
So my number 4, it's The French Connection.
Oh,
and
such a good one.
It's 1971, William Friedkin. It's a Robin Moore book. It's based on a book. It's a real case that happened in the 60s in New York. Gene Hackman as Jimmy Popeye Doyle. Roy Scheider at his hottest. Aaron and I both really love, my co-host for Best Neighbors podcast. We both have the hots for Roy Scheider. Fernando Rey, Tony LaBianco. It got the Academy Award for Best Picture, Actor, Director, Writer, Editing. There is a car chase scene that is phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's bananas.
It's legendary. It's bananas. And William Friedkin, this is a year or two before he did The Exorcist. He had no permits. He basically said, just drive really fast and we'll catch everything we can. And it's thrilling. And it's New York, and I love New York stories. I'm a New Yorker. And Margo and I are definitely going to cover this one day for Book versus Movie, because it is based on a book. But that's my number 4, The French Connection. It's whenever it's on, I'm watching it.
Yeah. I rewatched that one maybe last year. I rewatched it, and I hadn't watched it in a long time. And I forgot about like how it ends. Like, it's a really messed up movie. I think people think it's like, well, he's the cop, so he's like a good guy, but he's not a good guy. It's a messed up movie, but it's a really good messed up movie.
I like the messed up movies of the 70s. They seem a little more real and realistic compared to what we get now. So, yep. That's
one
my
of,
number 4.
And one of the reasons I love Roy Schneider too, and I love Gene Hackman, because they look like men. Mm-hmm. They don't look like little boys, I guess, or like they don't look like even. I mean, how old were they in that movie? They probably weren't even that old, but they still seem so old.
Didn't people look older back then?
Right?
I would say women when you see.
They were probably in their 30s, right? But they look like they're in their 40s or 50s.
Oh, well, it also depends on how you live. Like Jaws, Margo and I covered Jaws, and Quint, Robert Shaw, that old man was 47 years old when he made that movie. Yes. True story.
That's weird.
Bananas. Yeah. So but people used to look older.
Yeah, that's it. They did. Before we had like really nice face cream. Is that why?
Yep. I totally think that. And I know friends that I worked in magazines for a while and beauty editors, and they were like, you don't have to spend a ton of money. Like L'Oreal and all those big companies have all of these scientists that work for them. And they make good stuff. Right. And our grandmothers would have loved the moisturizers that we have now.
Well, that's the key, everybody. Moisturize.
Yup.
Wear sunblock.
Yup.
And on that note, have you seen, this is another one on my list, have you seen Heavenly Creatures?
Oh, of course.
Oh my God, the movie's messed up. So this one's 1994, and it's directed by Peter Jackson, and it stars Kate Winslet and Melanie Lynskey, I hope I pronounced that right, as two teenage girls who murder one of their mothers in like 1950s New Zealand. This movie was like a punch in the gut when I saw it back in 94. And then looking at it now, like as someone who like has a kid of their own, the idea that your child that you love so much that she's trying to like do the right thing, even if it's not coming across that way, would kill you is, needless to say, very upsetting.
Yeah, and it's based on a true story. This really happened. And then one of them, they were forced to separate. Like that was part of their punishment for killing you. Now you can't be friends anymore.
Yeah,
that's
well, they sentence them to jail. They go to jail, but then upon their release, they're not allowed to see each other again.
Right. And then one of them became a very famous crime author.
Yes. I have not read her books. Have you read any of her books?
I don't read a lot of fiction crime, like very, very little. I like the nonfiction myself.
This movie it's just a trip, like the way it's shot, because the whole thing is that these two teenage girls form this like very intense friendship, and they're like writing a novel together, and they build like a fictional world in their book, and the movie also tries to show that fictional world. So it goes between reality and this weird, like, surreal area, like, where people, I think they're kind of made out of clay, if I'm remembering that correctly. Yes. And it's just a trip. It's such a weird movie. It's got these really great performances. I mean, I think this was Kate Winslet's first movie. And then it's got these really cool style choices by Peter Jackson. It's just a really cool movie. I don't even think I couldn't even find it for streaming, so I didn't get to rewatch it before this, but it's one that I've thought about a lot, and like I said, it's like a punch in the gut.
It's such a weird little film because there are these two women, the girls, and they bond. Was it over Mario Lanza? Is that who they like? They're just completely in love with this opera singer. Yeah. And they have this like weird, passionate affection for him. And then they're going to be separated, so they kill the mother. And then at the very end, like there's all the lesbianism is sort of like hinted at, but then at the very end there's like a clay orgy. It's like bizarre. It's a very, very weird, messed up movie, but really well done.
And it's so funny that this is the guy who goes on to make Lord of the Rings. Like they don't seem terribly related other than New Zealand, but it goes to show you that I think Peter Jackson could tell really great stories that aren't related to The Hobbit, and he should try doing that again.
Yeah, totally. Well, did you see what was his latest one? He won the Oscar. the something. Oh, help me.
Peter Jackson won an Oscar?
Did he? No, that was Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
Sorry, I get them mixed up.
Oh, no worries.
Sorry, guys. Had a brain fart. Sorry.
No worries. What else is on your list?
Okay, so my number 3, you probably already mentioned it. You did already mention it. Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, I love Bonnie and Clyde. I rewatched that for this too, but I didn't put it on the list. I'm glad it's on your list.
Yeah, I rewatched it last year because of the Oscars, because Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. And I was like, these were really gorgeous young people at one time and were so hot.
Yeah.
And their chemistry in this movie, it's 1967. Arthur Penn directed it. Their chemistry is incredible. It's off the charts. And we also, once again, we have Gene Hackman. Mm-hmm. We have Estelle Parsons, who I think she played Roseanne's mother in the old days of the Roseanne show, but she won an Oscar for Blanche. And we have Michael J. Pollard. And it's this movie, by the way, like it took a long time to take off. Like the critics were super divided about it at the time. And I think it was Pauline Kael who wrote something for the New Yorker, like, oh, this is magic, this is brilliant. And then all of a sudden it was just nominated for everything. It was like her fashions, Faye Dunaway was like a fashion icon.
She looks so beautiful in this movie.
Oh,
like I was coveting like her makeup, her hair, the clothes, all of it.
Everything. She said she starved herself basically.
Yeah, of course.
To be small. Because Bonnie and Clyde, and then, if you learn their true story, they were a couple of losers. I mean, they were not very smart people.
Right.
They were not very charismatic. I mean, she did write poetry and they did love each other, but they both were really whack. She was like only 5 feet tall, too. Oh. She was very petite.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, she's super, super tiny.
I love when they're taking the photos and she gets in front of the car and she's holding the machine gun and she puts the cigar in her mouth. And I was like, what a badass bitch. She is foxy.
She is foxy as shit. She really, really is. And yeah, I just love that movie. There's another one, like when it comes on, I just start watching it. I can't help it. And by the way, Warren Beatty, he made a deal. He got 40% of the gross profits.
So he is so smart. Yeah. That dude is wicked brilliant. Smart. It's such a good movie. Like it's such a cool story. The leads are so cool. Like it's like the Pulp Fiction of its time. Actually, now that I think about like the way it's edited and the violence and all was a big deal in 67. So
if you look at movies that came out in 1967, it was usually like musicals, like Hello, Dolly. Yeah, and then something like this comes along that's dark and weird and sexy. And I could just I would love to see this in a movie theater, actually.
I would love to see
on a big screen
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed rewatching this one, and it almost made the list. But I decided to cut it for my next pick. Have you ever seen Star 80?
Of course.
It's 1983, directed by Bob Fosse and starring Eric Roberts and Mariel Hemingway. And it's about the murder of Playboy Dorothy Stratton by her estranged husband. And I saw this movie when I was too young to see it. So it came out in 83. I probably rented it on video. So I was probably 13 when I saw it.
Oof.
And the movie really stuck in my brain. And so it kind of popped into my head as something that I should revisit. And rewatching it now with with the Me Too movement and our awful sexual predator president, this movie seems even more timely to me. Every man in this movie is trying to control and possess Dorothy Stratton. And I mean, one of the weaker things in the movie actually is I don't think Dorothy Stratton is a really fully fleshed out character in this movie, but it makes it really scary, the idea all these men trying to control her, and then it ends with her estranged husband. Eric Roberts is the biggest fucking creep in this movie. He's so
he's horrifying.
He's so gross. He's with his gross porn star mustache, and he's just sweaty the whole time. Ugh, he's so gross. But he feels like she owes him and he owns her, and it's just, he wants to possess her and thinks that, she's like having an affair with a director, and and the director is Peter. It's Peter Bogdanovich in real life, but they don't call him that in the movie. And then I read that after the murder, he like paid for Dorothy Stratton's little sister to go to modeling school and things like that. And then eventually he married Dorothy Stratton's little sister. Isn't that gross? It seems kind of gross.
It's really bizarre. She was like, Dorothy was, if you look at the documentaries about Dorothy, she's a very beautiful, sexy woman.
Yeah.
And she was super innocent. She was like this kid from Vancouver.
She was like 20 years old or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
When she died,
when he was
super young.
When she died very young. Yeah, she was like 20 or 21. Her husband met her when she was only like 17. And I think he had to get permission from her parents, like to date her or something.
Yeah.
But he took naked pictures of her, sent them to Playboy. And then we have the amazing feminist Hugh Hefner controlling her.
Right.
And then she comes under his control, and then he's trying to take her away from the ex-husband. And then Dorothy wants to be an actress, and she's actually pretty good in the movie. They All Laughed, I think is the one that what it's called. But yeah, and she's actually pretty good in it. And, she had potential. She was super pretty and very, she had potential. But the way she dies is just horrible to think about. And it's horrible to see it on screen. And that's a really good choice. But, yeah, it makes you feel kind of icky.
Yeah, the movie definitely makes you feel icky. And I feel like it's not a movie that people talk about very much, which is why I booted it off the list. Or added it to the list because I felt like it was maybe a little underappreciated, and with everything that's going on right now, it seemed very appropriate. But it is hard to watch for sure. And he's just so he's really, really good in the movie. I don't want to make it sound like Eric Roberts isn't good. Like, I think people forget that Eric Roberts was a really good actor. I think now he's kind of a joke, but he was a really good actor. He's very good in the movie, but he is such a creep. Like the total creepy guy that would, in his 20s that goes to a high school prom, so that he can like feel like a big man or what. It's just gross, but it's good performance and it's a good movie.
That's a good choice. I think sometimes if you put the year into a movie title, that can turn people off.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, 80 might seem like really old to people.
Yeah.
Because we're old.
So what's next on your list?
So my number 2, and it's something we covered in Book versus Movie, it's Goodfellas.
Oh,
and
yes.
Martin Scorsese. It's based on a Nicholas Pileggi book, Wise Guy. And, 1990s, Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, Paul Sorvino, Frank Vincent. Joe Pesci won the Academy Award. For some reason, Martin Scorsese was nominated, but he didn't win the Academy Award this year. And it was one of those, I can't remember the movie.
Dances with Wolves won.
Going back to Dances with Wolves. You know what? That's not a bad movie. People make fun of it.
They don't.
I like it.
You know what it is? It's another example of when Forrest Gump beat Pulp Fiction. Like,
yes.
One movie is clearly like cooler and is going to be the one that kind of stands the test of time, and then the other movie is more old school Hollywood, like more of a to go back to using the term, a total square movie. And Dances with Wolves is kind of like that.
Yeah. It's actually gutsy though. It was like 3.5 hours.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because at the time, like, Dances with Wolves was like different. It's a Western told from the point of view of the Native Americans, which we didn't have. It's 3.5 hours long. It played at my movie theater. I saw it a gazillion times. It was a kind of a big deal. But it doesn't stand the test of time like Goodfellas, because Goodfellas is awesome.
Goodfellas actually freaked me out the first time I saw it because it was so violent and intense. So it took me time. Like, I had to go back to it. But it's one of the ones, like I said, we covered on Book versus Movie. It's one of the ones, it shows up on TV. I start watching it. I get totally absorbed in it. I think the performances are amazing. The music is great. It's just, I think it's just one of the best true crime movies. And it's a great book, by the way, Wise Guy, if you're ever looking for a good true crime book. It was really well written. So that's my number 2, Goodfellas.
I think people forget that that's a true crime story. I think that they just think of, what am I, some sort of clown to you? Blah, blah, blah. They just think of all that stuff and they don't think about that it's actually a true story.
It's based on all real people.
Yeah.
And they were monsters, by the way.
Right.
They were really terrible people.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome pick, and I was pretty sure that was going to be on your list, which is why I didn't put it on my list.
Oh, good.
That's a good one. So up next for me is the only true crime story on my list that gives me hope, and that is All the President's Men.
Oh, good choice. I love that movie.
I love this movie. I watch it like 2 or 3 times a year. Turner Classic Movie loves to play it, usually around 4th of July, which I love that they consider it a patriotic movie. I've talked about it before on the podcast as I think we talked about patriotic movies, and I put it on there. It's directed by Alan J. Pakula. Oh, I don't know if I pronounced that. Yeah. With Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman as the Washington Post reporters Woodward and Bernstein, who, of course, investigated the Watergate break-in and got Richard Nixon to resign. And I just want to imagine that that's going to happen again. That history repeats itself.
I hope so, because it seems like it is. Like he's using Nixon's playbook to do stuff.
I know, it's so sad and frustrating.
He hates the Post. And he hates the Washington Post. I mean, all of that's there. And it feels like a thriller, even though you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's every time I watch it, you get excited. You get excited for them. The performances are so good. I love that movie. That's such a great choice.
Well,
such a good choice.
I love journalism movies. I love movies about newspapers. I used to work at a newspaper, so there's something about it that just scratches an itch I have. But when you say like it builds tension, it really does. Like, and that's the mark of a really good movie. Like, how do you build tension for a movie where you already know how it ends? And this movie makes it happen, and it's just such a good one. Like, every time I see it's on, I'm like, oh yes.
Yeah, our president was a crook. It turns out our president was a criminal.
Yeah.
That's
And also, Robert Redford is really, really attractive in this movie. I don't understand people who think Dustin Hoffman is good looking, but Robert Redford is definitely good looking.
He's definitely foxy.
He's very foxy. And I should mention Jason Robards as well as Brent Badley, which is who Tom Hanks is playing in The Post. And Jason Robards is the shit.
I think so too. I agree with your assessment of The Post, by the way. Like, I thought it was totally fine.
Yeah.
But for me, that movie, that could have been an HBO movie.
It would have been
2 nights or something.
It would have been the best HBO movie, but it just wasn't very cinematic for me.
Yeah. And too many famous people in small parts. Yeah, that was very distracting. Because I think everyone wants to work with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned it on the podcast. It had what I was calling the Rogue One ending, where it like brings you all the way up to the Watergate break-in.
Yes. Oh, I know.
To tie it to All the President's Men.
I laughed at that scene.
There's a theater here in San Francisco, the Castro Theater, actually did a double feature of The Post and All the President's Men.
Oh, wow. Did you go?
No, I didn't. I really wanted to, but I couldn't make it happen. But I thought it's an obvious, amazing double feature.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
So what's next on your list?
So I think you and I both picked this movie, so we're just going to talk about it at the same time. We'll mishmash together.
Yes.
But my number 1 is Zodiac, and directed by David Fincher, and it's also based on a book, Robert Graysmith. He was a former cartoonist and reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. And I've tried reading that book many times over the years. I can't. It's just indecipherable to me. But this movie I've watched many times over the years. And this is one of the ones I saw in the movie theater, and I had to put my jacket over my eyes several times.
Yes.
Because it scared me so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw this one in the theater too. And I've seen it. One of the reasons I super love this movie is because it's local to me.
Yep.
I grew up in the Bay Area. I live in San Francisco, so I know a lot of the areas and the neighborhoods they're talking about. And to see the movie here in San Francisco with an audience filled with people who probably lived through this was a real trip. And the movie scares the shit out of me.
Oh,
Like every time I watch it.
same here. That
Like,
first time he stabs the couple at the Lake Berryessa. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
It's
That
like
horrifying.
And it's just filmed like it's such a nightmare. You know, it's like 1 minute everything's fine and the next minute there's a dude here and now this is happening. It's
Yeah.
really, really scary. And it's just such an eerie movie. It's got this overwhelming sense of dread just hanging over it. Everyone's so great in it. It's got Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo. It's such an awesome movie. And I used to say like, oh, this is underappreciated, but I feel like now everybody's coming around on this one.
Yeah.
And no list about true crime would be complete without something about the Zodiac killer.
Well, you know what's really interesting is because they solved the Golden State Killer using DNA evidence and doing one of those open source DNA sites. And so people are like, well, let's try to get the Zodiac killer this way. And
Yeah.
so this could very well be solved, within a year or two. I mean, for all we know. So I think it's always, but it's like one of the great murder mysteries because he changed his MO a bit.
Yes.
And he also was a brilliant guy. He wrote these letters that had to decode. And that's how Robert Graysmith got interested in it. He tried to decode it and he became obsessed with it. And he became obsessed with the case. And it remains unsolved. And I lived in the Bay Area when I went to college. I went to San Jose State. So I know the Bay Area pretty damn well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it captures like 70s San Francisco so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the other reasons I love watching it so much is I just love seeing old San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I think as someone who likes to read about or watch things about true crime, we can all relate to the character Jake Gyllenhaal's playing because he's not really an investigative reporter. He's not a police officer. He's just, he's kind of on the outside looking in and kind of gets sucked into it. And it's really, at some point, like the scene where he goes into the house and he feels like I'm in over my head.
Charles Fleischer.
Yeah.
He's in Charles Fleischer, who, by the way, was the voice of Roger Rabbit.
It's so
And that
scary.
scene scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because I thought, oh my God, he's going to attack him.
It's so
Like
scary.
you're talking to Zodiac right now. Yeah. That's a great, I picked it too. We both picked a great one.
Yeah. Good pick on our part. Go team.
Yay. Pat on the back to both of us.
So let's go through our second list and we'll go through it a little bit faster this time.
Okay. So I picked TV movies and you picked documentaries.
Yes. Should we just still go back and forth?
Yeah, let's just do that.
Cool.
All right. So my number 5 TV movie is Texas Justice.
Ooh.
And it stars Heather Locklear, Peter Strauss, Dennis Franz. And it's a true crime that happened in Fort Worth, Texas. A woman named Priscilla Barnes. She was shot. Her 6'10" boyfriend was shot. Her daughter was shot and killed. There was a shooting at her house, and she was divorcing a guy named Colin Davis. And Colin Davis was tried several times and was always let off, even though there was jury tampering. It is the most batshit crazy case ever. Heather Locklear is at her Heather Locklearist.
Oh, nice.
And she's hot. She wears this diamond necklace that says "rich bitch." Like the whole thing is that she's the second wife of, and Peter Strauss is great as Colin Davis. And Colin Davis, by the way, his lawyer was a guy named Racehorse Haynes. And Racehorse Haynes is very famous in Texas. He's a Houston guy. If you got him as your attorney, you were definitely guilty and you were not going to serve a day in jail. You were going to get off. And so it's got all of that for me. So that is my number 5, Texas Justice.
Awesome. Is it streaming somewhere? Because I want to watch this.
If it's not, I bet it's on YouTube, if nothing else.
Okay.
Everything's on YouTube.
Okay. Putting that on the list. Yeah. So my documentary pick, some of these are probably totally obvious picks, but I'm doing it anyway. My number 1 is The Thin Blue Line, which is the documentary by Errol Morris, who always makes documentaries I want to see. This one is like the one that it's the template for like every true crime documentary we see now. It's about Randall Dale Adams, who was wrongly convicted of murdering a police officer in Dallas in 1976. And of course, what's so great about the documentary is they made it while Adams was in prison, and eventually this documentary proved that he was innocent, and eventually he was released. But it is like the template, like everything you see now, like the interviews, the face-to-face interviews, the recreations, like all of that stuff is in this movie that actually played in a theater. Now this is just something that would go straight to Netflix, but this actually played in a theater. And Errol Morse used to work as a private detective, so he's, you know, really great at like asking the right questions and digging up facts. And I'm just a big fan. And I don't know how you make a true crime documentary list and you don't put Thin Blue Line on it.
It changed somebody's life.
Yeah.
I mean, it really did set out to do what it was intended to do, which is incredible. And at the time, there was a lot of controversy because of the reenactments.
Yeah.
Like people were really like, oh, that's not what a documentary is. That's not. And now they do it all the freaking time.
Yeah.
Like I if I don't get a reenactment, I get annoyed, you know?
What's next on your list?
So at number 4, we're going back and forth here, and this is one of my mother's favorites too. It's Small Sacrifices. It's Diane Downs.
Yes.
It's an Anne Rule book, which I was obsessed with. It came out in like 88 or something. I gave it to all my friends. This woman, by the way, Diane Downs, she basically was driving along the road, and she said a bushy-haired stranger, she pulled over, and a bushy-haired stranger jumped out, like in the middle of the woods, and he just shot at her and her kids. And she drove the car to the hospital and said, some guy just shot my kids. Turns out she's the one who shot her kids. She was going through, she got divorced. She had a new boyfriend, and it's crazy. Farrah Fawcett. It's got Ryan O'Neal. It's got John Shea. He's always really good. It's a great, I think it was like a 2-part ABC thing. They played it all the time on Lifetime. It's like one of those perennials. Diane Downs is crazy, and she's still nuts, and she's still in jail. And the best thing is that one of her kids unfortunately didn't make it, and 2 of them did. And the prosecutor, played by John Shea, he adopted those kids, and they turned out great.
I read that, and it made me want to cry just reading that.
Yeah.
I thought about rewatching, because Farrah Fawcett was like the true crime TV movie queen back in the 80s. Like, she was like, I'm like, who would that be now? Who's the equivalent to Farrah Fawcett? Like Marky Post or whatever. Like, they made a ton of TV movies like this with Farrah Fawcett, and I wanted to revisit one, and I was entertaining the idea, and then I read the subject, and I was like, no, I can't watch that one again. It'll just make me cry too hard.
It's really, I mean, she's crazy. I mean, it's just, it's you can't, and then the craziest thing, okay, I'm name dropping in a weird way, but in jail, she basically had a romance with another guy who's called the I-5 killer. And they exchanged love letters. He killed a friend of mine's mother and sister. She and I were in a couple of classes together in college, and she told me about this one day. So it's so weird. It's such a small world, but it's really fantastic. It's a great performance by Farrah, and the woman, you know, not quite as beautiful in real life as Farrah Fawcett, but pretty close.
Yeah.
And Ryan O'Neal's actually really good in it. And they were dating they were a couple at the time.
Yeah.
So that's my Small Sacrifice. I watched the living shit out of it. I recorded it. I recorded her interview on Oprah. I had them all on one VHS tape, and I watched it all the time.
You are hardcore.
I am.
I
am a little hardcore.
Margo, who hasn't tried to change for a man? Come on.
Oh, bushy-haired stranger, sure. That's not a weird description.
Not at all. Not at all. So I'm going to go with Capturing the Freedmans.
Oh, good job. Good job.
This one is super creepy. I actually was sent this DVD when I worked at the newspaper as like, hey, like, maybe you'd like to review this or something. And I brought it home and I watched it and I was like, what a creepy, creepy documentary. And then the DVD sat on my shelf forever, and I was like, when am I ever going to rewatch this?
Right.
Like, it's not rewatchable. It's not something where you're like, oh, totally put on Capturing the Friedmans. It's going to be awesome. I'll have some wine, paint my nails, watch Capturing the Friedmans. It's directed by Andrew Jareski. Oh, I suck at names. Who would later go on to make The Jinx, which is...
Oh, that's such a good one.
Is such a good one. And I didn't put it on the list because I was like, I'm going to put Capturing the Friedmans on here. Everybody knows about The Jinx. So he was working on a documentary about a children's party clown named David Friedman. And then as he's working on it, he finds out that David's father and brother were convicted of sexual abuse in the 80s. And he uses narration and interviews with the victims and these like tons of old home movies to kind of put this documentary together and tell the story of this father and brother that sexually abused all these kids. It's hilarious.
It's on Long Island. That's where I'm originally from. So I get the feeling and the attitude there. And yeah, it's like Margo would say, it's not the feel good hit of the summer.
It really is not. It is really a super bummer, but it is really well done and really interesting. And I think worth checking out if you haven't seen it.
Absolutely.
Okay, what's next?
So my next one, and I didn't realize I was doing this, so I looked right now, but it's called Murder in Texas. Like I said, Texas has a lot of crime. There's a lot of crazy shit happening in Texas.
They have the biggest and the best crime in Texas.
They do. They're the hugest. So this is a movie. It came out in 1981, and it was one of those, like, it was always on Lifetime for a while. And it's Farrah Fawcett, Sam Elliott, Catherine
Of course
Ross.
it's Farrah Fawcett.
I know. I did it again. Andy Griffith is in this movie. Craig T. Nelson. And it's about this woman, Joan Robinson Hill, that they think her husband, played by Sam Elliott, killed her with a paste. He was a doctor, and that he gave her a pastry that he put poison in it or something in it that made her die. And then they tried to convict him, and they couldn't convict him. And it was crazy. And then like her father got involved, and then John Hill was killed in a burglary, and home burglary thing. But it was always suspicious. It was always kind of like, did he really get killed, or did he sneak off to Mexico? And I'm not selling it very well. This is like a 2-part movie.
You sold me on it. It's on the list.
Yeah, Farrah Fawcett is so. She's at her Farrah Fawcett. She is like 1981 Farrah, beautiful, and they live in this creepy house, and he's a creepy guy, and it's fantastic. I love this movie. I bought it from the library when it was on VHS, and then I converted it to DVD so I can always have it. But I'm sure it's on YouTube. Now that I think about it, everything's on YouTube.
I love how hardcore you are.
I am so hardcore. I know. I can't make fun of nerds because I'm as nerdy as anybody. I'm the nerdiest. So yeah, that's Murder in Texas.
All right, that's going on the list. So I think my next one I'll talk about here is The Staircase.
Yes.
Which is directed by, here's another name I'm going to ruin, Jean-Xavier de Lestrade. I think that's right. And it's documenting the trial of Michael Peterson for the murder of his wife, who he claims fell down some stairs.
Right.
And the director has full access to Peterson and his defense attorneys. So it's really about true crime, but it's also like a really interesting behind the scenes of a murder trial. There's 2 sequels to it that I actually haven't seen yet because I haven't been able to find them for streaming. But I will watch them as soon as they're available because I'm into it. The same director did one called Murder on a Sunday Morning, which I haven't seen in a long time, but I thought was really great. But The Staircase is, so his wife falls down the stairs. He claims that she was probably drunk and she slipped. And the cops at first are like, yeah, that could have maybe happened. And then they find out that at one point he was living with a family, like a friend who also just fell down the stairs and died. And he adopted like that friend's children. It was all very sketchy, and it's just fascinating.
they had all this access to him at home.
Yeah.
Like while he's going, you'd be in the trial all day and then he'd come home and like the prosecutor, it was in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
The prosecutor was this woman who wore the heaviest, most awful makeup, so distracting. And it was, and you know, but the whole thing was that he was secretly bisexual.
Yes.
And we're talking, this happened over 20 years ago. So it was like, ooh. He's bi. Yeah. Like, oh, so of course he killed her because he's, you know, he's had sex with men.
He's got the gay.
Yeah, he's got the gay on him. So that's, and he also is, let's just be clear, a very peculiar man.
For
like
sure.
The way he behaves and the way he talks and stuff like that. My dad, when this was live, it was on Court TV and this was live. My dad had just retired and he didn't know what to do with himself. So every day he would watch this case, like gavel to gavel on court. And my dad was convinced he was innocent.
Interesting.
Yep. And you couldn't change his mind.
I feel like this is one of those documentaries too that people watch and you don't have the same conclusion. Like I might watch it and say like, well, I think he's guilty, but like your dad could watch it and say, no, I think he's innocent. I feel like it is it's a real conversation starter, this one.
It's one of the original, like it's one of the things that really turned true crime on its head.
Yes.
The staircase, and they still play it on Sundance or something every once in a while.
Yeah.
And there's supposed to be a follow-up because he went to jail and then he got out of jail. And then there was the theory of the owl. There's the owl theory. That owl hit her head inside the house.
Flew into the house because sometimes that happens and scared her and made her fall down the stairs.
And the blood spatter evidence, which was really crazy. Yeah.
I like to believe it's the owl.
Yeah, I do too, actually. I'm kind of rooting for the owl. For owl domination.
It seems like something an owl would do. They're such assholes.
I don't like them either.
What's next on your list?
So this is another Bay Area connection. 1989. You probably know this. It's called I Know My First Name is Steven.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God, this is devastating.
Yes.
And devastating on several levels. Stephen Stainer was kidnapped in the late 70s, I want to say. He was a young boy kidnapped by an older man and taken away. And then the older man molested him, you know, because that's what they do.
Yep.
And then that man kind of gets tired of Stephen. He's like turning into a teenager. He steals him when he's 7 or 8. And then around when he's 15 or 16, the guy brings in another kid. And then he realizes, like, oh, man, he's probably going to do it to me. What he's going to do, he'll do to this child what it's been done to me. But he also thinks he might kill me now because he doesn't need me anymore because I'm older and I'm whatever. So Stephen takes this kid and they walk miles to a police station. And it's an incredible story. And just says, all I know is that my first name is Stephen. He didn't know his address. He didn't know his phone number. Like when this man took him, the kid, I mean, so after that, people started saying with kids, you got to know your address, you got to know your phone number, you have to have a safe word, you have to have a blah, 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 blah. This is one of the reasons why. Yeah. And then, oh my God, it's Corin Nemec who played Parker Lewis Can't Blues.
Oh, yeah.
He's so good. And then Stephen, he only got $30,000 for the rights to his story. And in 1989, like soon after the movie came out, he died in like a motorcycle accident. And he was a young father with kids, with like a pizza delivery guy. The crazy shit, are you ready for this?
Yes.
Is that his older brother, who always resented him for being kidnapped and for being the center of attention and stuff, turns out he's a serial killer.
Yeah.
And killed women in Yosemite. And is now in jail for that.
I'm so jealous that you got kidnapped and raped. You're so lucky. God.
He's so insane. He is, I mean, it was crazy. And then just this being a small world, my friend Kristen was friendly with the daughter that was killed when they were kids because they're from like Pleasanton or Dublin or something like that. They're like from the East Bay originally.
So awful.
It was so crazy and awful. And Stephen Stainer, like you can look him up, like the interviews with him, he was so haunted. He had to go to trial and basically say, this man molested me.
Yes.
And it made a stigma for him in high school because people didn't understand. It's so tragic. Yeah. It's so tragic. And he was treated weird. And the man didn't get anything. I think he only got like 10 years or something. So ridiculous. Yeah. It was so bad. So yeah, but I remember like that one just was like a gut punch. Yeah. You know, that story. Yeah. So that's my I Know My First Name is Steven.
I wrote that one down as like, oh, I hope she brings this one up because I
Oh,
also
good.
remember that one. And I remember one called Adam
Oh,
about
yeah.
the kidnapping of Adam Walsh. And both of these stories were like super big deals that every parent was aware of these stories. And it is like exactly what you said. That's when it started turning into like, you need to know your name and your phone number. And like the paranoia of like your children are going to be kidnapped, like went through the roof.
Yeah. Stranger danger.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
Adam being particularly sad as well.
Oof.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I'm like, listen to our podcast where you can listen to me use the word awful over and over and over again.
And making inappropriate jokes to relieve
Yes.
the tension.
So, hey, speaking of dead kids, my next documentary is Paradise Lost, the child murders of Robin Hood Hills, which, of course, there were 2 sequels to that, Paradise Lost 2 Revelations and Paradise Lost 3 Purgatory. And, of course, I'm sure everyone knows these, but I have to put it on the list anyway. It's all about the West Memphis 3, and they were 3 teenagers who were accused of murdering like 3 younger boys as part of a satanic ritual. And apparently the main evidence was that, you know, they liked heavy metal music. And then they kind of coerced a confession out of one of the teenage boys who, you know, was kind of intellectually challenged, I guess. I don't know if they ever say like what his issue is, but, you know, it's not very hard apparently to coerce confessions from young people. And that's what they were able to do. And this is another documentary that just has all kinds of access to police and attorneys and the accused and the victim's family. And in particular, that stepdad that won't shut up, that keeps coming and talking to the film crew and just, oh, he's crazy. It's just one of those ones that it's really scary. The idea that it doesn't take much to convict these kids and they're found guilty. And one of them even gets the death penalty. It's some scary shit. And it's super sad. You know, you feel bad for these families. Their boys were murdered.
Yeah, and they never got the real killer. They've still been looking, but they haven't. That one is also just a gut punch. And then you get really into their case, and then like big celebrities like were behind helping them get free. And by the way, they all got out.
Yeah.
But they had to plead guilty, like
Right.
sort of like a time served kind of thing. But when they got out, they had to learn things like how to use an iPhone and internet and all that stuff. Like that's how long they were gone.
Yeah.
And that's such a good choice.
My sister and I saw the first one and we were just really into it and like reading about it all the time. And then we'd watch the next one and you watch the next one. And my sister, you know, went as far as to like read all the books and she's very into it. And it's just one that we talked about a lot as it was going on. And it's just such a good one. And how crazy to be able to document it all from like beginning to end.
Yeah.
Like,
no
I think
kidding.
there's another one to make now with like these guys being out and what their lives are like now. This really could be like a new like 7-Up series. Where they could
That's what I was just thinking.
they could revisit like these guys like every 7 years, and I would totally watch it.
I would too, though. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's such a good choice.
So what's next?
All right, so my last one,
Yep.
and it's one of the most famous true crime television series, miniseries ever. It's called Fatal Vision,
Oh yeah.
and it's based on a Joe McGinnis book, and it's very controversial. Because, well, Jeffrey McDonald is our lead. Gary Cole plays him. And it's one of those things like the movie is so convincing that this man is guilty of killing his wife and his 2 daughters and making it look like hippies came into their home and did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Acid is groovy or something like that. So his family is killed. He's a doctor on a base, on a medical, like an army base. And then the case kind of goes cold. He moves to California and then becomes like a swinging bachelor and calls his father-in-law all the time saying, oh, yeah, I'm looking for the killers. I'm totally looking for the killers. And he just completely forgets about this family. And Joe McGinnis is there. He hires Joe McGinnis he's going to trial, and he hires Joe McGinnis, the writer, to like tell his story. And it turns out Joe McGinnis, in the middle of it, realizes like, I think this guy is guilty as shit.
Yeah.
And this is my new bestseller. And so they stayed friendly. He had to pay back, but Joe Menendez had to pay. He was sued for fraud, and it was settled out of court. And Jeffrey McDonald, to this day, will talk your ear off about, I am innocent, I was framed, this is a miscarriage of justice. And he says every time that damn movie is on TV, people are glad that I'm in jail. And I think it's just the power. It's great performances. Andy Griffith, once again, is in this thing. Even Marie Saint's in here. Carl Malden is in this thing. And I watched the crap out of it, like every time it was on. And I'm sorry, The Thin Blue Line, who's the director?
Errol Morris.
Errol Morris thinks he's innocent. And Errol Morris has either created a documentary about it or is trying to create one, proving that Jeffrey McDonald is actually innocent. He thinks it's a huge miscarriage of justice. And there's weirdness on both sides. He was tried years and years after it actually happened, and the crime scene was totally contaminated. But I think he's guilty as shit.
Yeah, Fatal Vision was a big fucking deal when it was on TV. Everybody watched Fatal Vision. Everybody was talking about it. Like, it was a big deal. Like, I'm glad that was on your list. I think the guy from Fatal Vision could go out with the woman from Small Sacrifices.
Jeffrey McDonald and Diane Downs?
That's a love connection. They have so much in common.
Yeah, they don't think they're guilty.
Yeah.
They killed their families and they don't think they're guilty.
Yeah. There must be some sort of dating app for
criminals?
For criminals. I don't know what it would be called. I wish I had something clever.
I know. My brain is escaping me right now.
It's like M-date, murderer date, or something. So my last one, I wondered if this actually fell under true crime, but I decided to put it here anyway because I think it's amazing. And it's O.J. Simpson Made in America.
Oh my God, what a good choice.
It's a 5-part miniseries directed by Ezra Elderman. It came out in 2016, and it's the fucking bomb. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. Episode 4 is one of the most chilling things I've ever seen in a documentary, where one of the police officers details how he thinks OJ killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And this voiceover plays like over photos from the crime scene. It's absolutely chilling and nauseating. It was, ugh. But I decided to put it on the list because it's not, I mean, maybe it's not technically a true crime documentary. It does detail a murder case, but it also talks about like the Rodney King case and the ensuing LA riots and police brutality and kind of how it all ties together and how we got the outcome we got with this case. I think it's one of the best documentaries of all time. And
it really gives context to OJ. Like, if you didn't know who he was, and like young people don't know anything about this stuff.
No, they don't.
You know,
I didn't know. I mean, when OJ was accused of killing his wife, I was like, the dude from the Naked Gun?
That's what I thought too. I thought, like, why do they have handcuffs on him? His poor wife died. This is how little I knew about him. It also talks about like the Me Too movement. Like Nicole, the most chilling thing you'll ever listen is Nicole Brown Simpson calling 911 because her husband is breaking into her house, threatening to kill her, and the 911 operator just could not care less.
Yeah,
so it's like, awful. Ma'am, is he threatening you physically or verbally? Is he just yelling at you? What is he doing? It's awful. And 911 training completely changed after that because people listened. It was like, wait a minute, this monster was just let go.
Yeah.
Like they didn't press charges and a lot. And you just realize like just how famous and popular he was in the 70s and loved.
That's what I didn't know. You know, I knew he was a former football player. I knew that. But to me, I was like, oh, he's the dude from Naked Gun. Like, whatever. He's from the Hertz ads for the rent-a-car ad. You know, I didn't know. And something like this really just ties it all together and puts it all in perspective. It's really, really good. And now I just want to watch it again right now.
I know. You make me want to watch it again right now.
Your list is awesome. I wrote all of those down.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. Tell me if you watched them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, did you watch The Deliberate Stranger?
Of course.
Because I actually wanted to stream that one, and it wasn't available for streaming. But I remember thinking it was super good.
It's good, but for me, I didn't pick it because I feel like it glamorizes Ted Bundy.
Okay, good call.
And he's such a creep. And I think like everybody always goes on and on about how handsome he was. Like he's okay looking,
right?
You know, he's not Manson crazy looking. I mean, he looks normal, but that doesn't make him like a GQ model. And I feel like and Mark Harmon has said he kind of regrets that part because he feels like Mark Harmon is our Ted Bundy. He feels like he glamorized him a bit much.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's why I didn't pick. But I was going to say to you, I came by, my mother and I were talking about both into documentaries. There's one called The Witness, and it's about Katie Genovese. Mom and I actually, the last time she came to New York, we took the F train all the way out to Queens to where that happened. And we had like lunch at the place where that happened. So I come by this obsession, honestly.
That is amazing.
True story. True story. Oh, Mom, I think she was stabbed here. She goes, yeah, and then she ran over there. I'm like, yeah, that's how it happened.
That's awesome.
But that's also a really good one if you haven't seen it. The Witness. It's really good.
It is on my list. I had a couple of other random ones that were on my list that I just didn't make the cut, like Reversal of Fortune, and
sure,
that's a good one, or Spotlight, or Dog Day Afternoon, things like that. Really, I could
pick Dog Day Afternoon.
I could go on. I could just go on and on all day.
Yeah, no, this is like what I love to talk about too. Obviously, you could tell. This is fun for me.
Margo, where can people find you on the internet?
So on the internet, you follow me at Brooklyn Chick on all the social media. And for Twitter, actually, it's a little strange. I spell chick CHIK because you have to have a certain number of letters. But my main blog is brooklynfitchick.com, and I post all the stuff that I'm working on there. And my shows are Book versus Movie, Not Fade Away podcast, Best Neighbors podcast, and the Fifth Bottom Girls podcast. And none of those are about true crime, except sometimes on Book versus Movie.
And sometimes on Best Neighbors podcast.
And it says on Best Neighbors because my co-host Erin is also a big geek for this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I love all of your shows, and I do because I listen all the time.
Well, I love being on the Dorking Out show. Anytime you want me on, you tell me. I'm here.
I am going to want you to come back, and we'll talk about some 80s horror.
Oh, yes. We were talking about that. Yes. I'm in.
We started talking about Poltergeist, and then we were like, we need to talk about 80s horror. Maybe we should bring on Patrick Bromley, and all three of us could talk about 80s horror.
I think we can coax him.
I think we could, too. Let him talk about Tobe Hooper? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, now I'm going to let Margo go. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can find us at dorkingoutshow.com, and you can find me on Twitter at The Sonia Show, or you can find me at thesoniashow.com. And Chris will be back in the fall. Bye.